In this video, I'm going to show you one of Android 14's best new features, official support for screenshot detection. As of now, Android 14 is in developer preview too, so it may change a bit between the time I recorded this and by the time you're watching it. However, the bones of it should be solid. This video is broken down into 3 parts. Well, first, we'll take a look at a sample application that doesn't have any screenshot detection. Then we'll go ahead and implement that feature and see what changes. And then finally, we'll wrap this up by discussing some pros and cons. If you'd like to follow along with the application that I'll be showing you, feel free to check out the GitHub link that I have down below and get started from there. Let's jump into it. Now, to get started, you're either going to need a phone with Android 14 preloaded on it or an emulator that's running it. Now here I have an emulator running Android 14 DP2. Let's go ahead and take a look at the application. I already have it compiled, and if I go ahead and open it, you're going to see all it does is it has a string that says hello world. It's incredibly simple, but let's see what happens whenever I trigger a screenshot. The best way to do that, in my opinion, is to open up your terminal, and then let's use ADB to send a key command. The command I'm going to send it is ADB shell input key event 120. And if I go ahead and press enter, you're going to see it captures a screenshot, and I have a little preview of my window down here, and then just the application in the background. So there's really nothing crazy going on here. Now, the reason why I can't use this button up here to take a screenshot with the emulator is because it's actually outside of the functionality of the OS. This is specific to the emulator. So it's not going to trigger anything as far as the screenshot detection is concerned because, again, it doesn't actually ship with Android. So that's why I had to go ahead and go through ADB to do that command. Effectively, this key event 120 would be the exact same thing as if I had pressed print screen on my keyboard. It actually triggers Android to capture a screenshot of itself instead of the emulator doing that. That's the difference there. Now, I'd like the app to react in some fashion whenever it detects that a screenshot has been taken of it. And as you can see, obviously nothing happened. So let's go ahead and implement these new APIs inside of our application. Now, just for a moment, I've opened up the build.gradle file that's associated with my application. As you can see right now, on line 8, I'm targeting upside down cake. Now notice, this is a preview build, so I'm not saying compile SDK version because that requires an integer. I'm saying compile SDK preview, which is targeting the code name, upside down cake. Same thing here for target SDK preview. Now, once this ships and goes into production, obviously I'd replace this with compile SDK version and target SDK version and specify a number. But this is one of those little quirks if you're working with something brand new that require you to use the code name, which is a string. That's the first thing that's necessary. Let's jump over to the manifest, and we're going to have to implement a new permission. Right above my application, I'm going to go ahead and say uses permission. And then for the name, I'm going to say detect screen capture. This is one of those permissions that's going to be automatically granted by the OS whenever the user installs the app, so I don't have to worry about a permission prompt in order to get past this. Now I'm going to jump over to the main activity, and all of the action is going to happen inside of there. Very first thing I'm going to do is implement an onStart and an onStop function. Just like this, and then down beneath my onCreate, I'll collapse it. I'll have onStop. Now inside of this activity, I'm going to implement a callback that this registration is going to require. So I'm going to make a private val, just like this, and I'll call it screen capture callback. Then I'll set this equal to the screen capture callback class, which I'll implement right here. Now, for now, I'm going to keep everything empty inside of the curly braces, and let's do a little bit of work inside of the onStart and the onStop functions. Now, inside of onStart, I'm going to call a function called register screen capture callback. It's going to require 2 parameters. The first thing is going to be the main executor, which I have access to because I'm inside of an activity. I'll go ahead and pass that in. And the next thing is going to be the screen capture callback that I just created up above, just like this. So I'll put that in there. And then on stop is going to be the same thing, except obviously in reverse. This is going to be unregister screen capture callback. And in this case, I'm going to pass in just the screen capture callback. I don't need the executor this time. As you can see, I have a couple of errors in here. Let's take a look at what this is. And you can see it saying the call requires API level 34. So what I could do is surround this with a version check, just like I would here. But there's a couple of problems with this, unfortunately. I mean, if you've worked with pre-release versions of the Android SDK, this won't be a surprise, but if you've never done this before, I'll explain it real quick. Now, the SDK int right here actually hasn't been revised yet. So it's actually still reading API 33. So it's obviously not going to work. And let's say I go ahead and do it this way, and I'll do this the more standard compliant way. I'll say build.versionCode.upsideDownCake, which is Android 34, which is what I'm working with right now. If I go ahead and click on that, you can see the version code is actually 10,000. So obviously they don't really want you doing this yet, but it's kind of in place. So what I recommend that we do in this case is forego this altogether. It's really not practical to be using it yet because it's still a pre-release version of the SDK. So what I'm going to do is delete this. And I'm just going to suppress this for now. So I'll suppress the new API. I'll move this up to the very top because this is going to apply to both register and unregister. Now, I don't recommend doing this long term, but again, this is some of the oddities that we have with doing pre-release SDKs. Now, I want to be able to react whenever the screen capture happens. So inside of this callback, I'm going to change something inside of my view model. I have this already ready to go. I'm going to say main view model, and then I'll say screenshot value. So it's going to change that text from hello world to something else after it's seen that the screenshots happen. Let's go ahead and run this application and see what changed. Okay, now that the application is rebuilt, let's see what changed. I'm going to go to my terminal, and I'll rerun that key event. I've gotten a screenshot. You can see the text here change, and now you can see I get a little toast saying that the app detected that a screenshot was taken. But if I go ahead and open it, you can see it still says hello world. So obviously, there's a couple things that we need to discuss here. So first, let's start off with the pros. Now moving on to the cons, we can see that this is only reactionary. So it's only after the application has had a screenshot taken of it that the SDK lets us know that it happened. Plus, it doesn't register every single type of screenshot that happens. So for instance, if we go back to the application, I'll close everything so we get a fresh state, open the application, and one way that you can grab a screenshot is if you background it just like this, and you hit this screenshot button. So if I go ahead and hit screenshot, you can see it says hello world, but nothing happened. So if I open it up, it doesn't look like anything happened. I'll go ahead and run that key event one more time just to show you that it's still working. And as you can see, it does still work. So that's a bit of an oddity. I've also tested this to see if it works with Google Assistant. So if I ever say, hey, Google, take a screenshot, unfortunately, the app has no idea that that just happened. The other thing it doesn't seem to know is if you're using screen recording software to capture a video of your screen. So what I'm referring to is this. Most new versions of Android have this built in. If I go ahead and pull down the tray at the very top and swipe over, you can see I have this option to start recording the screen. Unfortunately, the app also has no idea this happened. So if you want to protect the content of your app from unnecessary screen grabs, you still have to use the old style Windows security flags to protect the content. Again, this new API is just an acknowledgement that you got a screen capture of your application. So hopefully as it matures over time, we'll be able to add in these features that I just talked about. If we were shipping this sample application to production, we would have needed to have surrounded the registration and unregistration calls inside of an if check to make sure that they only run on Android 14 and above. I've discussed how to do just that with a very easy, reusable, and self-explanatory paradigm over in this video. If you're interested in learning how to do that, click here. Otherwise, I'll see you next time on TLDR Android.